This is a real problem. When somebody is in front of you and asks you directly, I want to be sure I'm doing right, it's quite hard to be completely sure that they were not eating gluten, mainly just for the day before. Today, compliance is more a desire than a fact. Usually we face two situations in the clinic. One, when people try to do their best and they say, okay, I made a mistake. We have there from 32 to 55% of transgression. And sometimes they think they are doing right, but when we go to testing, we find that they are not on remission in biopsies or histological testing. And they are mostly in the same situation. To have 1 out of 3 patients not doing well is not a really good situation. So, what we have today for monitoring our current situation is that we have a tool set that's several items. One is the diet questionnaires, that they may be inaccurate, they are time consuming, and they are prone to mistakes. The second item is serology, that requests blood sampling. You know that children are not quite happy about needles. It's not so hard with the adults. And when you have a positive test, you are in a situation of inflammation, so maybe you are too late. They can render false positive and negative. We have another item in our toolbox that is a biopsy, but you need a dedicated facility, you need staff, and they are costly and not very comfortable. As Dr. Sanders said, your patient are not very happy when you say, we are going to repeat this endoscopy again. Imagine a baby, children. And finally, we have permeability tests and fecal calprotectin, but they are not very specific. So, having this panorama, we thought that we needed new tools. And ideally, this new tool should be rendering an early warning and should be able to measure intake and not consequences of this intake. We focus on gluten immunogenic peptides. They are the triggers of the immunologic reaction that happen in celiac disease. They are resistant to the digestion through the GI tract. We have a monoclonal antibody, the G12, that allows quantification of the 3,3-mer equivalent peptides that are the origin of the inflammation. That this is perfectly well documented. And we have experience using the G12 antibodies as a tool to measure gluten content in food. This has been an instrument for the industry for years. So having this element, we thought that reproved transit through the GI tract, then ingestion is proven. This is the foundation of the idea. It's not very complex. So initially, we went to the lab with some volunteer staff, mainly staff of the lab and the clinic, and we wanted to see if we were able to distinguish normal gluten, gluten-free diet, and different amounts of gluten, just to know what we have. We double-checked with another technique to be sure that the negative was a real negative, not a false negative. That was our main concern. It was the earliest stage. We were not sure about the technique. Our main concern was having false positive and negative. So we discover in this small set of volunteers that there is a correlation between gluten ingested and GIP measured in feces. Looks to be working. About timing, we saw that toxic peptides disappear from feces after starting a gluten-free diet. The red box is a normal gluten-containing diet. When you move to a gluten-free diet, do you stop eating gluten? It disappears. The GIP disappears from feces. So there is a timing and the signal you get. With all this information, we had our first paper that was published in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition with the main description of the technique. After that, we needed a test in the wild, a bigger test. So we went to a multi-center prospective non-randomized blinded for analysis trial. We were now better funded. So we have 3 main groups: celiac patients with a recent diagnostic, celiac patients on a long-term follow-up, and healthy controls. A total amount of 415 subjects from the whole country in Spain. Why? Because we have different traditional diet there. So it's quite different from the north than from the Canary Islands. So we wanted to test in different settings what's going on here. And we have children and adults. Perhaps it's not the same. We have the guess that it's not the same compliance in the little children when mommy cares about them, and an adult, mostly men. So what we got here, this is a negative GIP. Ideally, all the box should be white, but that never happened. So during the follow-up for gluten-free diet for more than 5 years, what you see is the longer the time you're on gluten-free diet, the higher is the amount of GIP that you get. It's quite consistent with what has been presented before. Is people forgetting things? They are more confident. We don't know, but this is clear in progress. Another finding was that when you have GIP positive gluten, that means you are eating gluten, the complaints about pain, about not feeling well are 4 to 5 folds higher than when you are negative. There looks to be a certain correlation. And perhaps the main finding is when you go to the distribution of age and gender, little children perform quite well. That's very good. This is the fiery wall of the pediatrician. We were pediatricians, so we were expecting to find this everywhere. And when they become older, things go wrong. And the first time I saw this, I thought, okay, we are going to repeat the data process. This is wrong, sure. That was right, this. Mainly men, this is huge difference here. So they don't take care about that. So imagine that the little children have no money to go to the canteen to buy anything if they are missing the meal. They have. And they have a lot of information. They just believe what the mom says. But this difference is huge. So it's clear to us we need new strategies to improve this. This is not acceptable. The cost of this is huge. That entails more complaints, more visits to the doctor, more endoscopies. But this is really, really a bad situation. So the picture is we have old boy is going to the clinics, probably is not doing well. It's a woman, much better, and children are perfect, it's almost always compliant. Another result we got from this trial was the dark side. For us was the dark side really. And what's this? We were quite confident for GS and TTG for follow-up. But unfortunately, when we got GIP positive, 75% were negative. So it looks it's working quite well for diagnosis, but not so well for follow-up. That's why we call this the dark side. I'm not so sure now when I say a patient based on TTG that they are performing well, that's real. Probably that's not so true. Most of GIP positive at 2 years of follow-up were TTG negative, so we had to reconsider our position. Reduced gluten intake is enough to get the negativity on TTG, but it's not enough to ensure a lack of mucosal exposition to toxic peptides. And that is have huge consequences. GIP absence is the key tool to ensure real gluten-free diet, we think now. We're talking about the follow-up, not about diagnosis. With all this information, we got this second paper. It was a very good cooperation between different centers. You can check it. Okay, in the lab, people is not very happy dealing with the brown stuff, so we decide to try with another more elegant system, that's the urine. We repeat the same trial. Initially, volunteers, people from the lab, from the clinic, highly motivated. And we saw that when you are on gluten, the signal disappears quickly in the first day. You go back to gluten content, you get signal again. But unfortunately, sometimes happen this. I'm not going to say who was this member of the team, but think, these people participated in a research about gluten-free diet, highly motivated. They know they have been closely monitored, and you have this. So imagine in the real world. Next step was to get or try to find out if there is any correlation between GIP and urine and mucosal damage. So we, having a small group of adults, we are not currently performing biopsies in children for monitoring, so this is only a group of adults. We are going to see here GIP negative, so good. Low level of inflammation. When we can get signal, but we cannot measure because the signal is very low, we don't know exactly the amount of gluten you have. It's a good side. Unfortunately, when you have plenty of gluten, you have a high degree of inflammation. So it looks to be a certain correlation between the GIP content and the inflammation. Of course, we need more testing. We need bigger series to know that this works so well. With all this, we got our third paper where you can double check all I am saying here. So we think that the role of GIPs in clinics is to avoid false negative in urine and ongoing gluten-containing diet before performing biopsy, because sometimes when you notice families, we are going to perform a biopsy because they said this food is damaging your children, they go to a hiding gluten-free diet, so then the pathologists become confused. After starting a gluten-free diet, reassuring patients they are doing well, this was an amazing discovery during the trial. People, when we were noticing them that they were doing well, they were so happy, they were so motivated. It was an initial indication for the test. When you have persistent symptoms, to check accidental gluten intake, and when serology stays positive in spite of gluten-free diet, we will see later a case. In future, maybe quite helpful on suspected refractory celiac disease and on clinical trials of drug therapies. We think will be maybe at role for the technique in the future about this. Now we go to the clinic. That's cases from my own clinic. First one is a 12 years old girl on gluten-free diet for the last 9 years. And the mother is a member of the local association. And she was quite concerned that something is wrong here. I don't know what, but something wrong, say here. Due to persistent abdominal pain and bloating, mother suspected the diet contamination. The father was also a celiac and moved, as the adult performed almost every year an endoscopy. We knew that the father was moving from March 0 to March 1 in the last year. TD was negative, so we thought, well, let's test. But maybe a bacterial overgrowth, it was detected. We give her antibiotics, was not doing well. So what we have here, the approved progress of overgrowth, something psychosomatic. It's a 12 years old, quite concerned for the examination and school class. May be practice a new biopsy to know what's going on here, because this is what we have without GIP. But we did that, we discovered a contamination. The only change in the family was quite baking. Baking was quite expensive at home. The mother decided to buy bread in a bakery that was offering gluten-free bread. It was not so gluten-free. Not very high, the level of gluten, but high enough to create new symptoms. But now we have the definitive tool to know what's going on here. And we save money not performing the biopsy. Another one, 8 years old girl, 6 years on gluten-free diet, hypoplasia of cerebral vermis. At the beginning, she showed severe gait disturbances when starting with the disease, the condition. Well, this girl goes to a new school, new canteen, and family see that she's really tired. The gait is not so stable again, and she's clearly having troubles. They went to the school management. They said, no, the menu is quite safe. We have all our papers are under control. TTG was negative, but in these cases with neuroceliac disease, it's not so helpful. Probably Marius is going to explain later us that. So the girl is just tired by the new school activities. There's a contamination. Management say that everything's okay, so we had to believe them. Maybe a new neurological condition, a complication. What happened? What's going here? We test for GIP and was positive. So the girls stopped eating in the canteen. She recovered. Now we have approved to offer to the school management. The company was removed from the school for contamination. And the girl recovered completely after a few weeks. So, but before having GIP, we had no real tool to be completely sure about what is going on here. Because everything looks okay. TTG negative, management is fine. She has a serious condition, maybe tired. But we have a different scenario here. And finally, I remember this was one of the first cases. It was the mom in front of me saying, I want to be sure about what's going on here. Now she's a teenager, have been on gluten-free diet for 7 years, have a thyroid condition. The patient, the girl said, I'm doing well. I'm compliant. I'm not cheating. But the mom is not so sure. She's having some doubts because she's a teenager, she goes out. And on the other hand, she have a persistent anti-TTG positive test. Low level, but positive. Negative. This girl jumped in the clinic, saying, I told you it was doing well. I think the best of the technique is the confidence that provide to the patient. They feel safe, and when they are making mistakes, they know why. We're not focusing on the cheaters. If they want to cheat, there's nothing we can do. But most of people are having a big effort, and they want to be fine. They try their best to be healthy. So I think this is something that can help in different ways. Now we are using a lot in the clinic as a new tool. So we think in the short future, we'll be adding a new line in our book, set of tools to follow up. GIP and feces, using feces in the hospital, or urine, I think in a short time at home with a home kit, will be helping a lot and adding another element to the follow-up of the patient. That's all. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much. Absolutely amazing landmark work. Any questions? Marius, so grab a microphone, will you?
Alfonso, excellent talk. Thank you very much. I think it's a very useful extra tool for us. I was just wondering whether, thinking about your last patient, trying to correlate transglutaminase with a one-off measurement of gluten in the diet, it's difficult because, of course, that patient may have positive TG2 because she ate gluten, she was having gluten 2 months ago, if you see what I mean. So the antibody response is going to happen and stay in the blood, what we think is for months. So that might be the reason why your last patient, for example, on a one-off, you were able to show that there was no gluten in the diet, but maybe in a week's time, there might have been some gluten in the diet. Do you see what I mean?
Well, I don't think so. The fact is, this girl have repeated tested. She went for a while to United States, and it was the only moment when the TTG was negative. I think it was more a matter of the test used, because it was a very low level of TTG with a high level of anti-thyroid signal. And we repeated to her several times, urine and feces, for more or less a year. So we were quite sure. Yeah. And otherwise, with our dietitian was recording everything, that she never found a real source of gluten. Just mom was ensured.
I'm David Bellamy, I'm a GP from Rotherham. If you were to equate this with sugar tests in diabetes, would you equate this to a random blood sugar or an HbA1c?
Right. It's hard to answer to that question. Well, we are just starting with the technique. In the early days of sugar monitoring, imagine now that you were in the diabetic clinic just asking somebody, okay, dear, how much sugar you ate the week before? We are doing more or less here. Now we are testing gluten, but we are looking for something to get information, like Mary says, to get information for a longer time. You got glycosylated hemoglobin or something, version of gluten. But we are still in the first steps about that. I don't know if I answered your question, but this is the way we are.
Okay, Alfonso, thank you so very much.